You see, we always want to talk about God, but how many of you believe in the devil? I didn't say that you had to believe in the devil from a perspective of worshiping the devil or worshiping Lucifer, but how many of you just believe that there is just like there is a positive force that exists in the universe that is responsible for good and giving us sustenance and things of that nature? How many of you believe that there is a negative force in the universe, or a force that I guess you can say that's opposite of this positive force? And I bring this up because it's something that you really need to think about, because if everything in this matrix has an equal and opposite power associated with it, then wouldn't it be safe to say that this dark force or this negative force, or what you may deem this satanic force, has just as much power as this positive force that we speak of, if not more, here on this plane? And that's what I'm going to get into on this particular episode. See, really, truly, God, like a real, true God in this dimension of a force of, I guess you could say, positivity, would be based upon balancing light and dark. A real true God that has strength and power would have to be a balance between positive and negative. Because when you look at the positive symbol, according to mathematics, the plus symbol, which represents positive or positivity, I like to teach this a lot. You see a negative symbol within it. You see a negative symbol within the positive. So this teaches us that this particular God that is supposed to be represent positivity has to have an experience in negativity in order for him to show you positivity, so that you can understand it. And where I'm getting at is that, like, we see a lot of things going on. Like, for instance, we heard about this shooting that went down in Oregon. This guy, didn't believe in organized religion, and definitely didn't believe in Christianity, and said he shot up all these people or whatever. Then we have the scenario in Charleston, South Carolina, and Columbia, South Carolina, where a lot of South Carolina is up underwater, and there were fatalities associated with that. And no matter how you look at that, you could say, well, God did this and everything happens for a reason. But was that positive or negative? Those two scenarios that are brought up, is this considered positive to you? If you were caught up in a city in a storm, and you were flooded out, and you couldn't go to the store to get food and things of that nature, and you were locked into your house, would that be a positive experience to you? Most likely, no. I mean, you may say it is, in your state of soberness, because you are probably doing good right now. You're able to jump in a car and go get what you want to do what you want. But had you been stuck in that situation, would that have been a positive force to you? That's negativity. That's archonic energy, and that's essentially what I want to address in this particular video. You see, this realm is ruled by negativity, and it even says it in the Bible. In your Bible, for Christians, that are listening to this particular video, in your Bible, it talks about how Satan was cast into the earth and was given dominion over the earth. This means that he's the God here. That's right. Darkness is associated with negativity, and Satan represents the prince of darkness, right? Or Lucifer, whatever you want to call it. Even though I know Lucifer means one thing and all of that, but I'm just speaking on a more of a mundane level. I know that Lucifer means the bringer of light and the carrier of light, or the torchbearer. I realized that. But this Satan that was cast into the earth was given dominion and control and rulership over the earth. So you got to ask yourself, and like truly ask yourself, like, do we really believe in like God, or do we really, on the low, believe in a God that really represents Satan? People that say that they believe in God and things of that nature. Because Satan has a sophisticated network, a sophisticated setup, because he was here for a long period of time before humans got here. And that's what I'm going to get into right now. You see, the story of Satan goes back to the Sirius star constellation. It goes back to a whole nother galaxy. And in the Sirius star constellation, Satan, and I've spoken this before, and I'm kind of coming from a different angle and perspective. Him and his father, Humbaba, disagreed with the rulership and disagreed with the council and separated themselves and put themselves into another network, or basically essentially left the realm of what you would call Ilium. Some people call it Ilium, or it's called in Greek mythology it's called Elysium, which is supposed to mean heaven, but essentially where it really took place at was in the Sirius star constellation. And in the Sirius star constellation, which is of course located in the 19th galaxy, there was a council set up, and this council was based on a structure and a hierarchy, and you had to get approval to do certain things. You had to answer to certain people, and these particular Satanists and Luciferians eventually broke away and set up this network here in what's called Earth. This is considered Earth, but Earth just means like soil or ground, or Earth represents materialism, essentially is what it is. So Satan was given dominion and rulership over the material realm. He was given rulership over the realm of materialism, and he set up a kingdom predicated upon materialism. Those of you that watch the Avatar, I'm using this for an example because I recently got a chance to peep out the whole all 4 seasons of The Legend of Korra, actually, which is the Avatar episodes that I'm speaking of, or whatever. I haven't seen the first set of episodes dealing with Avatar. I saw the Legend of Korra, but in the Legend of Korra, the Avatar is set up on different nations. You got Earth nations, Fire nations, Air nations, things of that nature. But the Earth nations, they would be similar to the Satanists that I speak of, or these Luciferians. They would be associated with the material realm, but they first were a part of more so what you would consider an air nation. An air nation. So the Air Nation, if you remember, this was like the nation that they really had very little material. If you look at the Air Kingdom, and according to the Legend of Korra, if you looked at it, you remember the Air Nation didn't look as immaculate and it didn't look as beautiful as, say, the Earth Kingdom. It looked like, they were more so kind of similar to like monks in Tibet, like Buddhists. They learned how to just live off of energy, essentially, and live off of, prana or chi. So what happened was that, they got tired of living like that. The Satanists got tired of living like that, so they were eventually given dominion. They were like, you need to go into another element, essentially, is what the story is really talking about. And they began to develop the earth element, which had to take place more so in this realm. And even the water element is associated with this. So what happened was that they set up networks on our particular planet, which is not called Earth, because remember, Earth just means soil or ground. This was originally called Tiamat, Eridu. There's different names for it, essentially, but Gaia, however you want to pronounce that. But it was not always called Earth. So when you say, like, I'm from planet Earth, like, if you were speaking with a sophisticated extraterrestrial group, they wouldn't really acknowledge that word the same way that you would acknowledge it. But they would look at the term Earth as more so just being like you're saying you're from the ground. That's all you're really saying to certain people when you use that particular term. So what happened was that they set up a sophisticated network, and NASA knows about this before I go into it, because I know some people need solid proof. We have a lot of Earth people out there that, they need solid proof. I got a Pisces moon, so I just flow with it. I like to just channel information, but sometimes you got to at least give somebody some direction to look up information so they can get more, research based upon what you're talking about. And NASA has a secret space program. Like, there's 2 NASAs, and it's hard to research, but there is a documentary called Secret Space Program put out by particular European cat. I forgot his name, man, but you guys know how to Google stuff. You guys are smart. Go online and just Google Secret Space Program by NASA, and a bunch of shit will come up. So NASA has a secret space program. What you see, what they tell us about Mars and all of that, they give you very little information, and there's a lot of secrets that they're hiding. But this Earth Kingdom, or this Satanist kingdom, was a network set up here on Tiamat, which is, you call it Earth, Mars, Saturn, and some of the moons of Saturn, and also in this missing planet. And this is what I want to focus this video on, actually, is this missing planet called Vulcan. Now, how many of you have saw Star Trek? Shout out to all my Trekkies out there. Star Trek, Dr. Spock, I believe, he was from a planet called Vulcan, which is interesting. And this is a planet, if you put in Vulcan on Google, you can look this up. This is supposed to be some people say it's a mythological planet, but it's a missing planet that was destroyed. There's only remnants or pieces floating around in the universe of what may look like, different asteroids or whatever you want to call it. But essentially these asteroids were really pieces of this planet Vulcan, and this planet Vulcan was destroyed by Nibiru on accident, which is very important. It wasn't done on purpose, but it was destroyed by Nibiru on accident. But before, Vulcan was actually kind of like, you can say, the empire of the Earth nations, of this Satanist network that I'm speaking of. And they had a very sophisticated technology that was self-sustaining and contained and self-governing. And they didn't need any outside help from any other extraterrestrial groups or any other extraterrestrial nations to run this particular government that they had in Vulcan. And it's interesting. I'm bringing up Vulcan for a reason, because what happened on Vulcan seems as though this is what's about to take place here on Earth, and how Vulcan ended up getting destroyed. And Vulcan got destroyed because of their cockiness, their arrogance. They were like, we're a self-sustaining government empire, so they had telepathic skills, right? And NASA knows this. We can telepathically, through channeling through our mind, communicate with different extraterrestrial groups and beings if we focus as a group of, like, if you sit in groups of threes and go into a meditation and say you want to start communicating with Pleiadians, and you guys hold hands in a group of meditation and you guys decide you want to communicate and channel extraterrestrial intelligence from Pleiadians, you can do that. You could definitely do that, and whatever, communications will start to come through, and they'll be, once you guys discuss, after your meditation's over, you guys will discuss what you saw, and it'll be very similar, very synonymous with, what the next person next to you may have saw and experienced, and whatever you whatever you guys saw individually, you put that together collectively, and this gives you a good idea of the message that was communicated to you via the Pleiadians or via whatever extraterrestrial group you want to communicate with. So people always say they want to have experiences with extraterrestrials, but that's a good way of doing it. So we have telepathic powers, basically, is where I'm getting at. And what happened, they got so sophisticated on Vulcan that they learned how to cut off people's telepathic powers, so that they built a grid, essentially, in Vulcan, so that your telepathic powers couldn't penetrate outside of this grid, so you couldn't contact, say, beings from Nibiru or beings from Sirius, or beings from the planet Razak, which is a planet in the 19th galaxy, like beings from different planets or whatever. You couldn't communicate with these particular beings because of this dome that was built, which is very similar to what's going on with this HART program, and what's the reason why these chemtrails and all this stuff, it's a lot more to this stuff than what you think or whatever, why we live in such a synthetic reality, because they wanted to, you can still communicate with beings on that particular planet, but you couldn't, reach out. And what happened was that when Nibiru was coming in on one of his first trips, actually, one of the first Nibirus were built, because there's more than one Nibiru. When I speak of Nibiru, I'm speaking of, I know a lot of you may not have heard of Nibiru, I'm speaking of a particular planet that is actually built by extraterrestrials. It was not a naturally occurring planet. What I mean by that is that it didn't occur just through processes of nature or processes of cycles, but this planet was created and originated by extraterrestrial beings as a spaceship. Nibiru is a spaceship. It's not just a planet. You could call it a planet, because planet just means a plan created by extraterrestrials. But this particular plan wasn't created based upon natural cycles, because you can create based on natural cycles, or you can create, like building a spaceship, just create something. So Nibiru was created, and I'll, do a video on Nibiru. I don't know if I have already, but I'll do a focus video on Nibiru to talk about that more in depth. But I'm not focusing on that here. But Nibiru was created by extraterrestrials. So Nibiru, on one of his first trips coming into this particular galaxy, now I have to say something else about Nibiru. Nibiru goes from 19th galaxy to what's called the 18th galaxy, which is the galaxy that we are supposed to be living in. And it crosses, that's why it's called Planet of Crossing. When you look up the term Nibiru, or you research it on Google or Wikipedia or wherever you go, you'll see that it's called the Planet of Crossing. It's very important because it's called the Planet of Crossing because it crosses from the 19th galaxy into the 18th galaxy. That's how it got that name. It's the only planet that is really has a cycle. It has an orbit now, but this was its first run or whatever. But it has an orbit, and it's the only planet that its orbit goes from two different galaxies, from 19th to 18th galaxy. So on one of its first missions, it crashed into this planet that you may know as Vulcan from watching Star Trek and from Greek mythology, but actually is called MALDEK, this particular planet, and it crashed into MALDEK. And remember, Vulcan, Saturn, and a couple other planets, Tiamat, even Mars, and a few other planets that I may not be naming here, were part of this Luciferian Satanist network. So the Nibiru, they communicate through telepathy. This is how they communicate, and they let you know when things are going to happen. But since they were so blocked off and so closed in and in this closed environment, they weren't able to receive the communications. So what happened was that a lot of people died. Vulcan was destroyed. As you know, it's not out there anymore. That's why it's called the missing planet. That's what it literally means. MALDEK means the missing planet. So it's missing. There used to be 10 planets in this particular solar system, not 9. I know some people say, well, Pluto's not a planet. That's what they say. Pluto has always been a planet. It's another story about Pluto that I'll talk about in another video. Whole other story. Pluto has a whole other extraterrestrial backdrop to it. So yeah, essentially, Vulcan is the missing planet, and it became missing because of a crash that happened with Nibiru and Vulcan. This is according to the Sumerian tablets now. So this is very researchable information. According to beings of Sumeria, it's suppressed in Western society, but of course, if you get to researching Zachariah Stitch and Dr. York, other people out there's many people out there that Lawrence Gardner, I think, is another one. Lawrence Gardner talks about this. They talk about this particular crash that took place, millions of years ago. I believe it was like 20 billion years ago even, or according to our time period. But that's another story too in and of itself, because Nibiru has a way of crossing into different time dimensions. And it can go into different parallel dimensions. So according to your reference of time right now, it's billions of years ago. But depending on if you're somewhere else, it may be hundreds of thousands of years ago or millions of years ago. But the time doesn't matter, because it's really, I'm bringing this up because of what's happening now. So this crash took place, and they lost their planet. So they had to find new homes. And a lot of these beings moved into, guess where? Here, Earth. They had a sophisticated network already set up, so they just relocated to Earth, and they brought a lot of their technology and a lot of their information and things like that with them, which is very important. But I'm bringing all of this up because we have to think about, like, what if we were able to communicate with different extraterrestrial beings? And what if we had our telepathic senses more activated? Could we avoid certain catastrophes that took place, like what's going on in Columbia, South Carolina right now? Had we had our communications up to par, our telepathic communications up to par, you may say, well, that's not impossible. We can't know if a hurricane's going to come unless the weatherman tells us. It's not true. It's not true, because you have to think about, why do birds know to leave somewhere right before something happens? How do cats and animals survive in the wild, and why don't they die? How do they know to relocate before something happens? But humans just seem to be dumb. We call ourselves the most intelligent creatures, but we don't even know when to move and go somewhere. It's because of the fact that it's not just your third eye being blocked and you're toxic and all of that. I could try to beat you up with a bunch of spiritual, religious mumbo jumbo is what it is. It's because they are putting chemtrails out there, and they have a dome over the earth that's invisible, that's blocking you from being able to communicate with extraterrestrial beings. You will know, you have the ability to even know the future. That's right, you have the ability to know the future, or a potential future, and then change it, essentially is what it is, because no future is set. But the fact that you can't communicate on a higher level, and your higher senses aren't in tune, you don't really know what's going to happen in the future. And none of us really have this power totally activated. So if we had this power totally activated, we can avoid a lot of natural catastrophes and a lot of things that, sudden deaths and sudden car accidents and things that we call just bad things happening to good people. But the thing is that we're not activated as humans the way that we should be. It's something that a lot of people really don't want to think about, and we're coming into a time where we have to be. Like, since this eclipse has happened, I don't know about you guys, but I just been feeling like the need to like really step it up on my spiritual game and really get more in tune with not just my higher self, but really get more in tune with the atmosphere and the environment around me, and being more sensitive, I guess is the word that I'm looking for. Being more sensitive to situations as they occur, being more psychically in tune, being more psychically aware, being more in tune with situations before they occur even. Because this is the type of world we are living in now. You can't just limit yourself to waiting for somebody else to knock on your door and tell you this, or waiting for your spouse or your mama or your daddy or whoever to move and tell you to do something. We have to be sensitive and know how to read the signs to be able and look at the clues and things of that nature so that we can know what's supposed to happen next. We are in a world now to where our outside reality is kind of like we are in a communication constantly with our outside reality. So when we see things in our outside reality, this is a sign of the future, or a sign of what we are to do next. So we create our reality by having a correspondence with the outside reality and what's going on with the outside reality versus the inward reality, the internal reality, and what's going on with us. And our outside, it's not just the fact that our outside reality creates our reality. I'm not just saying that, or you create your outside reality. I'm saying that these are both separate systems that we need to learn how to balance and merge together so that we can move more into positivity. You see, the Satanists, they desire control. Essentially, that's what they desire, or that's what they always wanted. So in order to control the grid, they had to block you off from having a communication with the atmosphere, with the outside reality. So even to a point where you wouldn't know if the God that you worship was really a part of a Satanist network. The prayers that you've given up is really a part of some darker so-called demonic force. And I know a lot of people may not want to believe that, but it's so possible. Because, say, for instance, you may pray to Jesus. And I'm not knocking if that's what you want to do, but I have to just say this, but Jesus is essentially a tone. And by you praying to this Jesus, Zeus, how you know you ain't praying to Jay-Z? Keeping it real, doesn't it sound similar? Doesn't it sound, and then you guys want to knock, and I'm not saying Jay-Z is a bad person or a devil or anything like that, but I'm just saying you guys want to like go and laugh at people and make mockery of people and knock people, but then how do you know you're not sending energy to not even just like to somebody like Jay-Z, but I'm saying like sending energy to a particular entity that may, have governance over even Jay-Z or even over different celebrities and things of that nature, because Jesus is Jesus. That's exactly what he is. So what I'm saying here is that the tones and the stuff that we say out of our mouth is so important. And this is what I'm speaking of, activating things in the atmosphere, our speech. So when you say, I believe in God and I pray to God, and you say, oh God, please help me to do this, God is a tone. And I'm going to start teaching on this. Words have multiple meanings. They have the tonation meaning, the etymology of the word. They have a translation in the particular language that you may be speaking in. Then they have a meaning in the original language that you got it from, because English is not an original language. So these things are important. So what I'm getting at here is that this is how the Satanists do it. This is how MALDEK was destroyed. And it's important that I'm bringing this up now, because I do feel as though, when the Bureau comes back in its orbit, it's supposed to come back. We really don't know the exact time, because it comes every 3,600 years or 36,000 years. I'm not sure which one it is. I believe it's 36,000 years. Excuse me. So when the Bureau comes back, in this next cycle, which some people say could be anywhere between 2020 and 2080, you're going to start to see a lot more catastrophes happen. The world is going to change. The world as we knew it. The world as we once knew it is going to change. And the way that we've done things and did things, can't do them that way anymore. So that's why I'm bringing this up or whatever. So it's important for you to start focusing more on not just connecting, with your God or, what you believe in your higher reality, but start to connect more with the internal God. When you connect more with the internal God, this will help you to question your thoughts. This will help you to question the words that come out of your mouth, because your mind is a receiver. Your mind works just like a computer would work if it was connected to the internet. It's just receiving data and information. You got to always remember that. So you think that telepathy isn't real, but Google's communicating with you telepathically via AdWords all the time. And I'm going to start doing videos talking about a lot of this. Google is working with extraterrestrial groups right now. And you say, well, that's impossible. Where did the internet come from? From back engineering, from extraterrestrial planes and ships that crashed. This is where they got the idea of getting the internet from. So the internet is totally an extraterrestrial occurrence. Excuse me. Totally an extraterrestrial phenomenon. So it's important that we start to look at these things and start to think about all of these things and start to think about our relationship with our thoughts, our relationship with our inner self, and making that better and learning more words, putting more words into our vocabulary, things of that nature, so that we don't end up being like the beings on MALDEK that got destroyed because they were isolated and locked in. They had this sophisticated underworld civilization. The only people that survived on MALDEK actually were those beings that lived in the center of the earth, which I believe is something that we're going to have to eventually learn how to live within the earth eventually again, if we're going to survive a lot of the calamities that are happening, because the waters are going to rise eventually, y'all. Like I was tweeting about it online, but El Nino, that's real. El Nino will be coming to a town near you. So like it's important that we think about this stuff. Nobody is exempt. You may think that you're on dry land right now, but what you have to remember is that places that are underwater, excuse me, places that are over water or above sea level now weren't always above sea level. This earth was not always set up the way it is right now. This earth shifts. That's why we call it the shift or whatever. And water can start to come out of the ground. Like water can not just come from the shores, but can start to come out of the ground, because a lot of the way that we got Earth set up right now was made that way by not just extraterrestrials, but even human beings. Had to move and shift these waters so that these lands will be inhabitable. Like in New York, especially in the East Coast. That's what I'm more so speaking of. If you're in the United States of America, that is. Like if you're in the East Coast or whatever, a lot of that was up underwater. And they got underground cities because the waters would rise so often. And when I talk about waters rising, you got to remember the water rises at a certain level. So if you build going down so far, you can avoid when water starts to come out the ground, because it does happen. And they got underground cities in New York. They got underground cities in Cleveland. They got underground cities in where the Pope was just at, in Philly. Why do you think he was out there? Like it's a lot of stuff like that people need to understand and prepare for, because this planet is shifting. So that's gonna do it for me. Just question yourself and ask yourself, like, are you sure the God that you're praying to is really here to help you? Or is it up to you to connect with your higher self and your inner self to save yourself, so that you can operate or activate that GPS system that you have located in you to save yourself? How do you know that the tones that you're sending out to pray to this God is not just giving a darker God more power? I just told you that this whole world was set up. This whole planet was a part of a Satanist network. The Bible proves it. So we have to try to avoid and beat the prophecy of what happened to MALDEK, so that it doesn't happen to us right here and right now. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. I'm going to go ahead and shut down. As always, my name is Ram Hotep. Peace.